Hello, and welcome to Senior Speak New Hampshire. My name is Dan Wise. I'm a volunteer for AARP, which is a sponsor for this show. How many times a week do you get that message from an unfamiliar number on your phone or an email from a business saying you have a problem and you don't even do business with them? How about that text saying you owe money to EasyPass? It's more than once a day, right? Well, fraud is a big problem, especially for us older than 50. And it's a priority area for AARP, nationally and here in New Hampshire. Well, how big a problem? The statistics are different, but the FTC has a figure on how much money was lost in New Hampshire in 2024. Think about how much that might be. Million? 1 year. 10 million? They say $34 million. That's a lot of moolah. This is a widespread problem, whether or not that number is possibly even understated. But it's a problem that we're going to be talking about today. And to speak about this, we have two guests who have a lot of knowledge in this area. I want to introduce Amy Nofziger from the AARP National Office. She's the director of the Fraud Victim Support program over there, and she oversees the Fraud Watch Network helpline, which last year received 100,000 calls from folks who have who've been subject to fraud, or who have been victims, or been exposed to it, or they're reporting it. And it's a great resource, and we'll go more into that resource at the later in the program. But you actually talk to a real person who is empathetic and informed, and they can help you whether you are reporting something or you've been a victim of it. And so we're going to talk a little more about that a little bit later. We also have from New Hampshire, Iris Altillo, and she, did I do okay?
Yeah, close enough.
Iris Altillo, and she is a volunteer who's deeply involved with New Hampshire's Fraud Fighters, which is part of the AARP local program, and she coordinates the Speakers Bureau, which has a couple of really good programs on various aspects of fraud, and we'll kind of go over that at the end as well. So thank you for coming in, both of you, on a beautiful day in June. Amy, I'm going to start with you first.
Let's go.
What are the types of fraud that people should be the most concerned about these days? Hey,
it's a big question. Let me try to get it quickly in my head. So, I mean, everyone should be worried about every type of fraud, but where we're seeing the most right now coming into the helpline are definitely imposter scams. And that could be a business imposter scam. Like you mentioned, there's a problem with your account and they're pretending to be Microsoft, or they're pretending to be Amazon. We're also seeing a lot of government imposter scams. You missed your jury notice, and you're going to be arrested. You mentioned the toll pass. We're now seeing the Easy Pass, right? We're now seeing that merge, saying they're from the DMV, and your license is going to be suspended if you don't pay your toll. So they're always, changing. So definitely imposter scams. Additionally, a lot of identity theft. I think people, when they think of fraud, they think of these high-tech frauds, and yes, there are those, but there is still kind of the simple form of identity theft. Wallets are getting stolen, purses are getting stolen, credit cards are being opened in people's names. That's a big concern. And then the third one that we're seeing right now, which is kind of a shift that's always been in our top 10, but right now, romance scams and online dating. And these are also morphing into some cryptocurrency investment scams. So, these are always there, but they're really more popular, and we think it's a lot of people are going online to meet new friends. There's been a lot of isolation since COVID, and so we think that has the increase with these online dating scams.
And you see a lot of these people where you get a text from somebody and it looks like it's a wrong number. Like they say, oh, what are you doing? It's been a long time, or it's something like that. And then what does that lead to if you were to go give in to that, where if you were to follow, if you were to answer that and say, oh, You must have the wrong number.
Yes, exactly. So that's what these criminals want. So they'll send you this, what seems like an innocent wrong number text. Like, hey, you coming for dinner tonight? Or what time's our golf game? And you think, oh, well, first you think, did I miss an invitation, or do I know this person? But usually you think, oh, they must have the wrong number. So you'll respond, I'm sorry, you have the wrong number, because, you know, we're nice humans. I mean, most of us are, right? And we want people to know that they have the wrong number. Then the conversation starts. And they say, oh, you're so nice. Like, oh, thank you so much for telling me this. Where are you located? And, you know, you're thinking this is innocent enough. Oh, I live in New Hampshire. And so you just have this conversation. It usually, and more often than not, will lead to a cryptocurrency investment scam. And I know people think, how can a wrong number text message lead to this? But I have seen it every day on the helpline, and people are losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in this scam that starts with an innocent seeming text.
Are we seeing that? Are you encountering that with folks in New Hampshire, Iris?
I can't give you numbers and what's happening in New Hampshire,
I don't mean numbers, but just
I know that I've gotten that quite a few times.
Yeah.
And I think, especially as a senior who might be looking for more people to talk to, you know, we're probably even more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because you're going to respond.
Yeah.
You think, oh, someone invited me someplace.
It'd be nice. And I'm being nice. It was an innocent mistake, so to speak. Now, who is the most vulnerable? You had some. I went to a presentation. Iris and I went to a presentation that Amy was at earlier today, and you said a couple things that I thought were really interesting. And one was that older folks are not necessarily more vulnerable than younger folks. And could you elaborate on that a little?
So I think that's a myth. So there's kind of a lot of myths about fraud, and people think it's, well, older adults, you know, didn't grow up with technology, they're lonely, they're isolated. All those things can be true, but they can be true for any age group, any generation. In my opinion, the biggest difference is that older adults have more money. You guys have worked hard your whole lives. You've accumulated your property, your retirement. Why do criminals rob banks? Because they go where the money is. So it's not necessarily that you're more vulnerable, but you have more targets on your back. And the criminals are going to target you more often than not. Trust me, they will steal my 20-year-old's $5, but they would rather steal my mother's retirement, right? So that's where I think, you know, older adults just need to know that you have more targets on your back.
Now, there's another thing that you said that was really interesting, and that was you said that sometimes the folks who say they're too smart, the folks who are really smart, who think they're smart, are maybe the most vulnerable of all.
So this isn't always the most popular myth busting of mine, but I think it's actually very valid. So I've been talking to victims for 23 years on the helpline, and I've always been in victim support and very victim focused. And I have talked to doctors, lawyers, professors. It doesn't matter what your career profession is. You can be a victim of a scam. And the reason I think that oftentimes people who are perceived as having more intelligence or smarter in our society feel like they're less vulnerable because their brain has never steered them wrong. And we still look at this type of crime as an intelligence-based crime. We look at the victims of these financial crimes and say, well, they should have known better, or how are they so gullible? You know, we hear people say, how could that happen to you? You're so smart. When this crime has nothing to do with your intelligence, it really has more to do with how you can handle your emotions. And a lot of people who are in professions that are deemed successful, like doctors aren't necessarily supposed to be emotional. They're supposed to be data-driven, get the problem solved, and move on. And so, again, I think the smarter you might be, the more vulnerable you are. And you also always trust your brain, and you don't ask others their opinion or any questions.
You don't ask questions. Oh, that's interesting, yes. I know that I was really shocked one time. I was talking to a friend of mine in Boston, and she mentioned it, and I had asked her, it was actually about this show, and I was saying, oh, you know, what topics should I do? And she's a very sophisticated person, and she says, you should do something on fraud. And I said, oh, and she says, I have a friend who was an executive in the Postal Service, and they were a victim of a financial crime. And I was like, wow, the postal. You figure those folks would be aware of this, but as you say, so they get sucked in, and the romance things are rife right now. Did that really pick up with the pandemic, or was that it's always been around, I suppose?
Yeah, it's always been around. I remember my first romance scam victim 22 years ago. I mean, so they've always been around, but with the onset of online dating and meeting people on social media and all the social media and all these friends that we apparently have that we've never met before in our lives, it really has increased. The one thing, and I said this a little bit earlier, is what we're seeing is the cryptocurrency investment scams kind of merge with the romance scams. So it might start out as a friendship, it might start out as a investment, it might start out as romance, but we're seeing them all merge. So you might be dating someone online, and then the next thing you know, they say, you know, honey, wouldn't it be great if we could invest together, because then that could, that could help fund our trips, and that could help me get to see you sooner. Right, so then the next thing you know, you're not giving the perpetrator necessarily your money, your boyfriend, you're giving it to an investment professional who happens to be working
together,
with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so it's not, the money is not going directly to them, but it's going into this great investment. Yes. And how long do some of these scams, over what period of time does this trust build up, go on maybe?
I think it all depends. It all depends on the scam. I mean, some of the scams are like a quick one and done, like maybe let's say an imposter scam. But that's another thing that we've kind of noticed with the calls coming into the helpline, that just like I was saying how the romance scam and the cryptos are kind of molding together, we're also seeing some of these, imposter scams, melting into a tech support scam. And so then they're getting into the people's devices. And we think they're doing that, and they're kind of merging these all together to be able to keep their victim on the line and in the scam longer. So, it used to be a jury duty scam. You get your $500 prepaid gift card and then you're done. But now it's like, no, it's the jury duty, and then we found some nefarious things on your computer. Now we have to get into your computer. So again, the longer they stay with the victim, the more money they can try to get from them. So, but I've been working with families who have someone in their life who's being victimized, and it's been over 3 years. So some of these go a really, really long time, because it's really hard to unravel all the emotions that these people have.
And sometimes, especially with the romance scams, they can be, family members can be aware of it and trying to talk them out of it. And at this program earlier today with FAST, which is a fraud prevention organization in New Hampshire, they were talking about how, law enforcement would talk to these people and, the adult protective services, and they would not be swayed from it. And it was just really horrifying. What about if you are a family, you have a family member who's getting older, and they're still living independently, but they're starting to need a little more support. What are the things that you should be looking out for, or how can you kind of try to help fraud-proof them? Maybe not 100%, but what are some of the things that you should be thinking about, just like you think about other ways of keeping them safe?
First, think about it, right? Like, know that it's an issue. I always kind of like to get people into this reality, and I'll say, okay, how many of you have a gated community? How many of you lock your door? How many of you have an alarm, a dog, a fence, right? We do all these things to protect our property. Now, what are we doing to protect our finances? And, a lot of people aren't doing anything. So at least think about it and start the plan. But even if it's for an older loved one, we should all be doing this together. So we should all be doing the same things that we're doing for an older loved one.
We should be
right?
doing it ourselves.
We should be doing it ourselves. So, if you don't have a freeze on your credit, do it together. Place a freeze on each other's, credit. Do it together. Set your phone up. Have every unknown caller go directly to voicemail. Do it together. Set up your contacts. Put a robocall blocker on. I mean, there's so many things that we all should be doing together. And then most importantly, always have that open line of communication with the older adult. I hear many times when I ask family people or family members, I say, have you talked to your kids about this? No, they're too busy with their job. I can't bother them. No, tell your parents, bother me, call me. Anytime, any day, please call me and check on this. Let's do this together. Really make it a team effort.
Yeah. Iris, what do you... Have you gotten that kind of question in your programs?
We don't, no.
Yeah.
That's not one, but maybe that's one we should be bringing up.
Oh, okay.
Because I know that as we get older, we do get more protective as well. Mm-hmm. So many times it's so hard for the children to talk to their parents.
Yeah.
They don't want to share finances.
Yeah, they want to share.
That.
It is so tough because it's, you want to get into something private, or you don't want to imply that someone is not not capable. It's a tough one.
Well, and they're still your parents, right?
We care for each other.
It's
for you.
I think of these conversations with my own mother, and she'd be like, "I'm your mother. What are you telling me?" Right? But that's why if you go in kind of in this team environment, let's do this together because I need to worry about it just as much as you do. No. Sometimes I can break down the barriers.
That's a good way to put it. These are the things I'm doing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good touch. So I want to talk a little bit now about some of the resources for fraud prevention and information and education. And we're going to have, there's the AARP.org website has a ton of material on fraud. And what's the best sort of navigation, just putting fraud in, or what's the best way to get to that part of the resources?
AARP.org/FraudWatchNetwork.
FraudWatch Network.
Yeah, AARP.org/FraudWatchNetwork. There you can navigate to any of the resources.
Okay, and one of those resources is a locator map. This is really cool, and they're going to show it on the screen, and you can put in your zip code, and you could see instances of fraud that have been reported to the Fraud Watch Network with an anecdotal description of what happened to that person. And these are submitted by the people themselves then, right? Is that, now, are they mediated by you guys before you put it up there?
No, well, so if you want to go to the scam tracking map, you can input a scam attempt on you. We don't want victims really putting in their story because we want to handle the victims on the helpline so they can get that one-on-one support. But let's say you got a suspicious phone call and you want other people in your community to know about it, you can go, put the complaint in and warn other people about it. And we read these and we read the helpline, all of the cases that come in the helpline, and that's in turn how we find out what is happening to people out there, so then we can put early warnings out to let the community know that, hey, this scam might be coming next.
Is there a newsletter or something like that people should go to? Is that something you can sign up for?
Yep, on the Fraud Watch Network webpage, you can sign up for the watchdog alerts. I'm sure you talk about those in your presentations. That really dissects a scam. So they'll pick a scam and it'll go kind of line by line and dissect the scam to get people really to understand how it works and how it operates. But it just comes into your email and it's free.
Okay, great. And the Fraud Watch hotline, which we'll put up too, is anybody can.
Absolutely.
They don't need to be over 50. They don't need to be an AARP member. Anybody can take advantage of that. And most of the resources on the website too aren't controlled or gated by a membership. So it's a great resource. And Iris, let's talk about some of the work that's done on fraud prevention here in New Hampshire. So there's something called the the New Hampshire Fraud Fighters,
right?
And they're dedicated to raising awareness pretty much. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, it had kind of petered off during the pandemic, and we've really just started again here in New Hampshire. And we are dedicated to two things. One is to keep us aware. So we have to stay on top of what's going on. And the AARP website is an excellent source, as are like the FTC and the FBI and things like that. Those government resources in AARP would be our sources to keep us aware so that we know that we're using good information. So we have to be on top of things, and then we have to find ways to get out and let the public know. So for example, if AARP is doing an event, we've got ice cream nights coming up in this month, and the topic, all of our events are fun with education. So we'll be there as fraud fighters. This is something new we're trying. It's working out well, to be able to chat with people as they eat their ice cream and talk to them about fraud. See if they have a story, because maybe we want to capture a story, but more to educate them and to provide them with material. We're planning on doing a big scam jam again in September. We had one last year, which was very well received, with local authorities, people who know a lot, and even somebody from Washington or Amy or whatever. We are planning on a 10-county tour, which is going to be Fraud Fighters and Speakers Bureau going out together to some site in each county with a speaker from the Speakers Bureau, which we could talk about in a minute, and a local policeman. So we'll give our part, and then they'll give what's happening in the community, what they can do. So those are a couple things that we're planning on doing with fraud fighting.
Okay. So Scam Jam is that like a fair, or what is?
It's a little bit of a fair, but it's more of like what we had today, like a conference. So we'll have, I think we're doing breakout rooms this year, but I'm not positive about that. We'll have speakers, and then we will also have vendors, not selling stuff, but talking about stuff. And then there was one other thing that just popped out of my mind. So if I remember it, I'll tell you in a minute. But
we'll come back to that. And that
I got it.
Okay.
We're going to do a Zoom kind of radio show every month, once a month, half-hour show. Probably starting in September, October, trying to talk about a topic that's relevant for the time period, and interject a couple little bullets, like AARP puts out 4 things to be aware of this month. So we'll interject some of that, maybe some man on the street. So that's another one we're planning.
And that'll have some seasonal, because there's seasons to fraud in a way too, just like everything else. And you can find out about that through the AARP, New Hampshire, going to Find New Hampshire in the AARP website, or Facebook. The Facebook page for AARP New Hampshire is always up to date on these things
and
too.
Also Twitter.
And Twitter.
Oh, it's not Twitter anymore. It's X.
X.
Always be Twitter to me.
Well, it'll always be, yes. It's okay.
And whenever we do an event, we hand out literature too about what's happening.
Yeah. Okay, great. And now the Speakers Bureau. If you are someone who's got some organization that you are part of, you can get a speaker from the AARP on a lot of topics, but several of them are about fraud issues. And why don't you quickly run through what those topics?
The two big ones it's called Scam Landscape, Staying Safe, or something like that. And it's kind of a good introduction into fraud. It talks about some of the trends. It talks about the different payment methods, because as we are learning, you can't know every fraud, but if you know how they're asking for money, it's a good trigger. So it talks about that. It talks about some prevention. Time permitting, it also talks about what Amy talked about today, changing the narrative, that a person who has been a victim is a victim of a crime.
Yeah.
So they're not, unaware of what's happening, too old to know they are a victim, and we have to make people know that, so it talks about that as well. And then, time permitting, we get into some types of fraud, like we'll talk about some imposter schemes. And what we've added is taking a look at our own phones and and taking things out of our phones and our email and whatever, putting them up on the screen and saying, this is how you know this is a fraud.
Just a real life example, like from 15 minutes ago.
One day I was at a presentation, the guy didn't turn off his phone, so we went to the back of the room to answer his phone, and from the back of the room I hear, I got one! And every time we give a presentation, somebody gets a scam call during it. So, but yeah, he was pretty funny that
all
way.
The time. Yes.
So
and then we have one on cybercrime. So how to stay safe online, basically, starting with protecting your devices, password protect those things and stuff like that, because it's amazing how many people don't do that. There's a separate one on government imposter scams, a separate one on romance scams. They're subsets. And we recently just started doing a couple from Senior Planet, but they're more technology-based, but we do have some on privacy, which is also, if you can protect your privacy, you can help keep yourself
Yeah, there are things to do that, and maybe we'll have to do a program one time just on some of the steps that people could take practically. I think one thing I want to quickly maybe run through at the end here is there are just some red flags that we should maybe end with, that, if people are asking for the form of payment is gift cards or a
crypto
machine,
ATM, which turns out to be a crypto ATM machine that they want you to put money into.
Venmo, Cash App, Zelle.
Or maybe an app, and really those apps should only be used for people that you really do know well. And urgency, right? I'm trying to show what I've learned, learned today.
Doing good.
Urgency and just something that comes out of the blue, right?
That's a big one.
Yeah. So, and you see that, and I still have a part-time office job, and I, just see these random things that come in, even through all the firewalls that the company has. So, well, I think I don't want to run over on our time. Is there anything you think we should put up? Again, the fraud hotline, Fraud Watch hotline, the phone number for that. It's really a great resource. Put it on the refrigerator, share, and maybe put it where you could share it with other people.
Absolutely.
And because I think the fact is that sometimes people are ashamed to report things. And you want to make sure people realize, hey, you can talk about this. You can talk about what's happening out there.
They also need to realize how important it is to report things. Not necessarily because they've been a victim already, so it's not going to necessarily help them, but it will help other people and it will help the agencies. So it's
and it's really not something to be ashamed of, because it's crime. If you got mugged, you don't act like, it's my fault I got mugged. It's a crime.
Absolutely.
And there were criminals that are very clever.
Yeah.
And they're getting cleverer all the time.
And remember that if one of your friends and family comes to you and says you were a victim of a scam, remember your response is important. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Thank you for telling me. Together we'll figure out a way.
Yeah.
Right? It's really important how you respond to these victims as well.
Right. Well, I think we're about out of time, and I want to thank you very much, Amy. Thanks for coming in. Iris, thanks for coming in. This has been really fun, and again, thank you for joining us for Senior Speak, and we'll see you next month.